let's go backtrack a little bit, Rafer. Again, all four of us have a slightly different perspective. Maybe you and Chelsea are kind of the similar age, so you might have some similarities there. As I'm looking at Rafer, I'm like, yes, I'm glad this JUCO player, this guy who wasn't always eligible in high school, made it to the NBA. I'm so happy for him. And he's a street ball player, where you're more like, well, that's the guy who went on to the NBA. I like hot sauce and Professor. So, talk a little bit about that. Like, do you feel that represented as well as a fan? And did you gravitate to the players who stuck around? Or did you already see kind of the business model, like, hey, Rafer's still kind of representing And1. He's in the NBA. What did you think of that, him not necessarily being on the tour anymore, and then the other guys kind of even be more popular?
Well, I think there was like one line in there where Nick Clario said something like he's the most famous street ball player of all time, and
last 40 years.
I politely disagree with that. Like as a fan, and then also just I think for you look at things under a different scope because you've been involved in the high school space for like so long. Like you look at it differently than I would. Like when I was in early 2000s, I was just a fan. I wasn't looking at it in the same respect that I would look at kids today. So for me, I liked Skip's game, but he was a guy that I couldn't really identify with because I could never be Skip. So like he made it to the NBA, and that was cool. Like that was really cool for like if you're talking about the entertainment street ball side, like at least you can throw some credibility for the game of basketball coming out of this product. Right. But the guys that I personally were like a bigger fan of were guys like Hot Sauce and Professor.
Matt, I just said this. Me and you are on the same page. I just said this.
And Air Up There. Like those are the guys that like I saw and I was just like, holy. Like just some of the stuff they were doing, like Professor added, Hot Sauce did all the illegal stuff. Professor had like some legal moves with a lot of flair, but he could also play even though he was tiny. So even when they took him to some of these like different outdoor crash the court events, like he could hoop, he could like stand his ground. Whereas there was one moment in there where they said that Hot Sauce showed up to a pro-am, and by the end of the day, they were calling him ketchup. Like there was level of game being played by both of them, but both of them had like their reasoning why they were part of the tour, why the tour got so big, was because of guys like them.
Yeah.
Speaking of Professor, how were you? How did you feel Professor not being in that documentary?
Man, like I feel like he was one of the biggest parts of that entire existence of And1. Like, obviously, the first mixtape is like you never want to discount that, right? So that like helped you get onto the scene. But what helped you go to like the next step and the next step and the next step? So like, if you look at, I was telling Ronnie about this on last night. If you look at the views on each mixtape on YouTube, it's like Volume 1 has like 200,000 views. Volume 3, when Hot Sauce was first introduced, has 2.2 million views. So there's a huge difference. And Volume 2 has like 50,000 views. So it may have been hot at the time, but what do people remember today, like 20 years later, like 25 years later? So for me, I think that like Professor 100% should have been in there, and he should have been like a huge part of it.